Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem, what a beautiful day. I wanted to study uh, Parshas Vayeishev. And what I'd like to do with everybody today is to go through chapter 38 of Parshas Vayeishev, chapter 38 of Genesis, one of the central chapters in the entire Torah, one of the chapters that talks about the birth of the Mashiach. And we are Jews, and the Hebrew name for being a Jew is called a Yehudi. It's even though it's that's what the name Jews are. Judaism comes from Judah. So this is a chapter that causes Judah to gain his leadership role or regain his leadership role. Puts him on the path. Really, the full development of his leadership comes in next week's parasha, and then the week after. But this is the parasha where Judah starts to reclaim his greatness. And so let's go to chapter 38, verse 1. Just a background to the story. What we're skipping in chapters 37 and chapters 37 is that Joseph the Tzaddik, is sold by his brothers into slavery. Or it's not, let me just take a step back. Not 100% certain from the text itself who sells Joseph. I'm just going to put that out there. You can look and see who sells Joseph. It's not clear that the brothers ever sold him. That's but they definitely threw him in the pit. And when he was in the pit, they threw him in the pit for whatever reason. Judah's reaction was not necessarily, Judah's reaction was something that was not ideal. Judah said to his brothers when they threw him in the pit and they said, let's kill him. And they said, look, they had said when Joseph was coming towards his brothers, they said to him, let's go and let's kill him. And Reuben says, let's throw him into the pit. And then Judah says in verse 26, Vayomer Yehuda Elachiv, Judah says to his brothers, what do we gain out of killing our brother? And covering up his blood. Let's go sell him to the Ishmaelim, and our hands will not be on our brother on him, because he is our brother. And the brothers listened to him. His brothers listened to him. But it never says in the text that they sold him. The text then states that the Midianites passed by, the merchants, and they picked him up. They took out Judah from the pit, and they sold Joseph to the Ishmaelim for 20 pieces of silver. So it's possible that the Midianites were the ones who sold him. Not necessarily the case that the brothers sold him. And that's something that's debated. But the statement that Judah says, Ma betza, what do we gain if we kill his brother? So the Gemara in Sanhedrin, which we're going to get to, God willing, the Daf Yomi in a week. Now we're about to finish tractate Baba Basra, B'ezras Hashem Yisbarach on Wednesday, and we start Sanhedrin on Wednesday night, Thursday. The Gemara in Sanhedrin, Vavam Abay says, whoever blesses Yehuda, call Mevarachas Yehuda, because Judah, in essence, saved Joseph's life, because he said, what do we gain out of killing him? Let's sell him. But he could have done so much more. So the Gemara says, whoever blesses Judah, says, Ma betzan kinarogas achinu, harei zeh mina'etz. This person is actually cursed. About this, it says, Votzeya berech ni'etz Hashem. The Botzeya, who blesses, is actually cursing God. That's the Gemara in Sanhedrin that says if you praise Judah for his action of quote unquote saving Joseph, you're actually in essence doing something wrong. And so, meaning to say that according to the way most people read this text of the Gemara, that Judah, since he had the ability, his brothers were listening to him. It says his brothers listened to him. He could have given them better advice. So therefore, that's how most of the commentaries read it. The Maharsha reads it differently. He says, whoever curses Judah because he didn't give the counsel to bring him back, this person is cursed. The word Beirach can also mean cursed, that's ironically, because Judah had the proper intent. And so it's possible to read it that way, but most people don't. Anyway, it's certainly the text, not the way Rashi reads it. Rashi reads it as Judah having done something very wrong, and the brothers perceived, and that's what leads us to chapter 8, the brothers perceived that everything that happened that was wrong was Judah's fault, because at the end of chapter 37, verse 34, it says, Jacob tore his garments and he put on the sackcloths after he hears that Joseph has been torn apart by his brothers, and he mourned for his son for many days. And then verse 35, and all of his sons got up and all of his daughters got up to comfort him. And he refused to be comforted. He said, no, I'm going to go down for my son mourning. And his father cried for him. And his father cried for him. So now in that context, where the brothers see what they've done and how they caused through their actions their father to be in such distress and horror and in anguish and in pain, it's in that context that we read the next chapter, which talks about the brothers, instead of blaming themselves, instead of looking internally and saying, oh, this is my fault, they look towards Judah, who is their leader, and they blame him. So now we're going to do a close reading of chapter 38. A close reading of chapter 38. Vayeishev, and it was at that time, Vayered Yehuda meit Echav, and Judah went down from his brothers. Vayedad ish adulami ushmo Hira, and he goes to. So he basically he descends from his brothers, and he goes to an Adulamite man whose name was Hira. And so all of a sudden we see something which we have not seen until now in the Torah, that the patriarchs and the descendants of the patriarchs are leaving the family, and making an alliance with somebody outside their family. And so Judah left his brothers. Why did he leave his brothers? Rashi says to tell us that the brothers removed Judah from his position of leadership. And it's telling us when they saw the pain that their father was in, they said, you told us to sell him. If you had told us to return him, we would have listened to you. So it was all Judah's fault. And so therefore, at that time, Judah went down from his brothers. Rashi said, not Rashi, the Gemara says that about this context of Judah going down from his brothers, because he started the mitzvah. He tried to save Joseph, but he did half a job. He what was the half a job? He threw him in the pit, but he didn't complete the job. And that's almost in essence worse than not doing anything. That's worse than not doing anything, because he had the potential to really save him. Are you trying to, or is the Newmans trying to raise their hand here? That's fine. So the Gemara in Sota 13b cites the actions of Judah as a way of teaching us an important lesson. It says, Koa osed var mitzvah o Gemara ubachar v'Gemara moridino so migdulaso. It says, Shenemar vahiba isa hiva yered Yehuda meisachav. So whoever does a mitzvah but doesn't complete it, and somebody else completes it, we remove them from their position of greatness. And so therefore, and the proof for that is that Judah went down from his brothers at that time. So, and the source for that is that Judah had started to save Joseph, but he didn't complete the job. And so we see from here a powerful idea that if you're going to start a mitzvah and don't do it and don't complete it, it's worse than not starting it. It's worse than not starting it, because it's showing that you're abandoning the mitzvah in the middle. When we start a mitzvah, we have to complete it. Don't do a mitzvah halfway. Don't do the mitzvah halfway. If you say you're going to do a mitzvah, then all of a sudden the stakes are raised. And so therefore Judah was removed from his position of authority, of his leadership position. Now in verse 2, Vayar Sham Yehuda Bas Ish Kanani Ushmo Shua Vayikacha Vayavoah. And Judah saw there a daughter of a Canaanite man whose name was Shua, and he takes her and he basically is with her. Now, I translate this as a Canaanite man, but Rashi does not adopt that approach. Rashi, based upon the Gemara in Psochim, Daf Nunam and Av, says it's not a Canaanite, but this is a merchant. Rashi can't accept the fact that Abraham had said, my son Isaac cannot marry a Canaanite. And here's Judah going to marry a Canaanite. So the Gemara reads this not as a Canaanite, but as a merchant. And so therefore Judah, regardless, but even if you adopt this approach that Judah did not actually marry a Canaanite, he just married a merchant, it doesn't matter because it's clear he's marrying somebody not based upon the litmus test that Abraham and Isaac had chosen that Abraham had chosen for Isaac as a spouse, but rather instead he's just taking like a merchant's son. And so now all of a sudden we could understand the rest of these verses which talk about how Judah's children were all sinners. None of them were, certainly not the two eldest, were not worthy of, were not considered righteous, and therefore they died young, according to the text of the Torah. So now it says in verse 3, Vatar Vateled Bain Vayikra Shmo Er. And so she conceived and she gave birth to a son. This is Judah's wife. And he calls the first son Er. Er means to awaken. So this also tells us that Judah, to my mind, was in a depression at this point. His whole life was in a tailspin. He had made a terrible mistake in participating in having his brother sold off. He made a terrible mistake that caused his father eternal pain. And so therefore, then it says Judah goes down. The implication is Judah is isolated from his brothers. Judah is in a Vayeishev, he's in a descent. He's down, he's depressed. And he gives birth to this child, and he calls this child awaken. Calls the child awaken. So, meaning to say, he's praying for, almost as though he's praying for an awakening from his depressed state. Then he gives birth to it. Then she conceives again. Vatarod vateled bain, vatikra shemo Onan, and she calls him Onan. So Vatosef Od, and then she gives birth to a third child, and she gives birth to a son, Vatikra shemo Shelah. And she calls the third child Shelah. And he was in Ksiv when she was born. Okay, so now verse 6. So Judah takes a wife for Er, his son, his firstborn, and the name of this woman is Tamar. So Er, the firstborn, did something bad in the eyes of God, and God killed him. What did Er do wrong? So here, the Gemara in Yevamos, there's two answers here. Rashi adopts the approach. Hold on one second. Rashi does not adopt the approach of the Gemara in Yevamos 34b. Rashi adopts a different approach. Well, actually, no. I mean, kind of adopts the approach. The Gemara in Yevamos says that we know that the next son, because what's going to happen is after Er dies, Onan refuses to impregnate Tamar because he's concerned that the seed will be named for Er and not for his own descendants. So he spills the seed on the ground. So the Gemara in Yevamos says that Er did the same sin. He also spilled his seed on the ground. But the question is, why did Er do it? We know why Onan did it. Onan did this sin because he did not want a offspring to be named for Er. But why did Er spill his seed? Excuse me. So here Rashi says, that the reason why he did this sin was because he was concerned that he did not want Tamar to become pregnant, and that would thereby, and this is what the Gemara in Yevamos says, he did not want Tamar to become pregnant and thereby spoil her beauty. So the sin of Er was basically the sin of valuing his own body, his own physical enjoyment in life over having a child. He desired his own pleasure, and he did not want to have a child. And we know that there is a commandment from the Torah that to have a child if one is capable of it. And so he chose not to have a child. And so therefore, since he chose not to have a child, for this reason, God punished him and put him to death. So this is the sin. This was the sin of Er. In this context, we're going to see the courage of Tamar and the bravery of Judah. So says the verse, Vayomer Yehuda la'onan, and Yehuda says to Onan, Bo'al eshes achecha v'yabemosa. So Onan was commanded to do levirate marriage with Er's wife, Vakem zera la'achicha, and lift up the seed for your brother. So this is the mitzvah of levirate marriage that in the Torah, and today we no longer do yibum, we only do chalitza, but it's the obligation that if a man dies without any children, in the war since October 7th, there were at least 15 widows whose husbands died and they didn't have any children yet. And so then under those circumstances, you're supposed to either marry the brother of the deceased, which we don't do anymore, we don't allow, or a chalitza, and this is what's done in all these cases, that the widow removes the shoe of the brother of the deceased and spits on the floor. And so therefore, that was what Judah said to Onan, come and do this commandment, and do this mitzvah of Yibum. But Onan does not want to do it. Vayeda Onan ki lo ye'azara. He did not want. He knew that the seed would not belong to him. What does that mean? He knew that this first offspring would be named for Er, and he didn't want that. And so therefore it says, Vayam Baal Eshes Achiv, when he was with his brother's wife, Vishiches Arza Laviltina Sanzar Lachiv. He spilled his seed on the ground. And so in that context, Hashem says, Vayera ba'inei Hashem asher asa. It's very bad in the eyes of God, that which Onan was doing. Vayamas gam oso. And God also killed Onan. So from the fact it says also, this proves that Er also was doing a sin, and he was the same sin. So, yes? Anybody have a question? I see. So, okay, you unmuted yourself, but I guess it was an accident. Okay, so there's a lot to say about these verses, but I don't want to go into it too much because whatever, everything is in the context. But now is where we start to see the further problems. So Vayomer Yehuda Tamar kalato. So Judah says to Tamar, his widow, Shvi almana beis avich, stay as a widow in your father's home, ad yigdal Shelah b'ni, until the third child, Shelah, will grow older. Ki amar penya muskan hu kechav, because he must have, Judah, and he must have been to himself. He said, lest Shelah will die like his brother died. Vatelch Tamar, Vateshev Beit Aviyah. So Tamar is now in a state that in Talmudic law we define as what's called a Shomeres Yavam. She's waiting for the Yibum, for this levirate marriage with the third brother, with Shelah. But she's not allowed to marry anybody else. It's like she's quasi-married to Shelah. So she can't marry anybody else until Shelah either marries her or does the chalitza with her. But Shelah was not old enough to get married yet, and Judah did not want to release her. Why did he not want to release her? I guess the ideal in the biblical times was not to do the chalitza, because when you see the chalitza would be frowned upon, because she spits on the floor in front of him and says, "This is what you do to the man who does not want to uphold the seed of his brother." So clearly, the best thing to do would be the yibum in that time, but he didn't. Excuse me. But Judah did not want her here. Shelah to marry Tamar because he was suspicious of her. In Talmudic law, this is called an isha katlanit, a kind of like a black widow, that a woman who's married and she has two husbands who die from highly unusual deaths, it's considered to be kind of like bad luck to marry her. Even though the Torah tells us that they die because of their own sin, Judah would not have known that. There was no way that Judah would know that. And so therefore, he's telling her to stay in her father's homes. He said, stay in your father's home. So Tamar went and she stayed in her father's home, but she's wearing her widow garments and she can't move on with her life. And she knows that the people who sinned were Aaron Onan, because she was aware of it. She was there, but they weren't trusting her. So what does Tamar do? Vayirbu hayamim, and the days increased. Vatamas bas Shua eshes Yehuda, and Judah's wife died, the daughter of Shua. Vayinachem Yehuda, Vayal goes no, who v'chira re'eu adu amit timnata. And so at that point, he went up to shear his sheep. He and Chira, his friend, the Adulamite, they went up to Timnah. Now, we should note that this is the first time in the Torah that the word Re'ech or Re'ehu appears. It never appears before this. It's ironic. And the first time is about a friendship between Judah and a Canaanite. He's called his friend at that point. So Judah is going up. He's going up to shear the sheep, which is obviously a double entendre, a symbolic word. Vayugad Tamar lemor. It was told to Tamar, saying, Behold, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear a sheep. Hold on one sec. So remember that Tamar is going to end up being the mother of the Messiah, the future mother of the Messiah. And we see from her actions here how courageous she is. It reminds us of Chana with her courageous actions of walking into the tabernacle. And also Tamar acts in a way just incredibly courageous. So it's told Tamar is saying that your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep. Vatosar bigdei almanusa. She removes her widow's garments from on top of her. Vatikas b'tzif, and she covers herself in a veil. Vatisalaf, and she wraps herself. Vatesha b'petach einayim, and she sits at the entranceway, the crossroads. Asher al derech, that is on the path towards Timnah. Kira asaki gadal Shelah v'hilo nitna lo isha, because she saw that Shelah had grown older and he was not being given to her as a husband. So on a very literal reading of these texts, we can read it that Tamar has removed her garments out of frustration her widow garments out of frustration that her father-in-law is not doing right by her, that he's keeping her as a chained woman and to a dead marriage, and he's not letting her move on. Either do the chalitza or do the or allow her to do yibum, but he's not doing anything. So therefore, she took matters into her own hands to show that she was not the one who caused these problems, and that Judah, and to try and get pregnant with the seed of her husband by getting pregnant from Judah. Now, even though this is not the typical levirate marriage, it's not even something that's allowed in the Torah, but it seems that this was a form of levirate marriage. That's what the Ramban says. That's on a literal level, but we could also read. Remember, we said Tamar will eventually be the mother of the Mashiach, because from this union of Judah and Tamar will come Peretz, and come from Peretz will come King David. So she's the mother of the Mashiach. So we could read this verse as a very symbolic of the messianic arrival. She removed her widow's garments. This is something we say in Lecha Dodi. We say, remove your widow's garments. And she covered herself in the veil, like a bride. And she sat at Petach Einayim, at the entrance to the path of the eyes. She had a vision for the future that was on the path. Asher al derech, that was on the path. It's a symbolic idea. So, and this is how the Hasidic rabbis also read it. Rav David Dov Meisels of Lutsk says she sat there with open eyes. She had a vision. She saw that kings would come forth from her. So she had a vision. She had the spark of prophecy at this time. And so we know that sin blinds the eyes, but the text is telling us here that she was the one. She was the one in the story who has the vision. She has the ability to see at this point. She's seeing with the truth in the world. And so therefore she sat there. Vayeishev. So Vayeishev, so Judah sees her, and he thought she was a harlot because she was sitting in the place that the harlots usually sit, and because her face was covered. Here too, I read this verse, and I'm reminded of the Mashiach. The Gemara tells us, maybe Rabbi Yosef, can I make you the co-host? Are you there, Rabbi Yosef? Rabbi Yosef, can I make you the co-host for a second? Pull up the Gemara.
Yeah, but I don't think that I have the ability to share on my phone.
Okay, well, Rabbi Yosef can look. Maybe so. I won't make you the co-host, but Rabbi Yosef, please, b'vakasha, if you have the ability to send me the source of the story, and I'll pull it up. The Gemara tells us. I forget the Gemara, but he says, where is the Mashiach? And they say the Mashiach is sitting in the entrance to Rome. And he's dressed like a beggar. He's dressed like a beggar at the entrance to Rome. And so this reminds me of the scene with Tamar. Tamar is sitting there at the entrance at the crossroads, dressed like a harlot, dressed like a beggar, and her face is covered up, meaning to say the Mashiach is somebody who's maybe even amongst us, who we don't recognize their greatness because we look at them and we see right through them, or we don't even see them at all. And their face is covered up, their greatness is covered up. And so that's the message here, that he looks at her face is covered. So when Rabbi Yossi sent it to me, I'll share with you that exact text. But in the meantime, we'll go on. And he turns away from her towards the path. Here too, we could say that Judah thought he was turning away. Judah thought he was turning away, and lots of times in life, when we think we're turning away, he actually turned towards her. That we actually turn towards the path. Sometimes in life, we think we're going off the path, but actually that's the way we're going on the path. el haderech. He turned towards her, towards the path. By turning towards her, he actually turns towards the path in life. Vayomer hava navo elayach ki lo yada ki kolato. He said, "Oh, I'm going to be with you," because he did not know she was his daughter-in-law. Vatomer mati tainli ki tavo elay. She said, "What will you give to me as a payment?" And this is what Rashi says. The word vayeto el haderech miderech shahaya ba, the path that he was on, he turned towards her path that she was there. Did you find it, Rabbi Yosef? I don't know. I can pull it up if you don't have it.
It's in Perk Chelek. I'm just looking for the exact quote.
Oh, okay, fine. Yeah, we're gonna get to that soon. We're in that tractate now, so we'll get to it in God willing in 117 days, probably. Are you sure it's in Parachelek? Yeah.
That's
Okay.
what it says on in
Okay, fine.
VBM.
So we'll be there very soon then in the Gemara. Okay. And I want to read the Gemara too. I don't want to just quote it because it's so beautiful. So Judah says, I'll send to you a kid from the sheep. She says, give me a collateral, give me a guarantee until you send it. So what is, give me a collateral. He says, what collateral can I give to you? And she says, give to me your chosamcha psilecha. Give to me your chosim was like your signet ring, and psilecha is like your. We'll see what Rashi says it is. Rashi says, "Aza iskatoch vishoshifach," means the ring with which you seal the documents and the garment that you cover yourself with. So she says, give me your ring, your garment, and the staff that is in your hand. And he gave him to her, and then he was with her, and she conceived by him. So that's what he gave her. He gave her these things, the staff and that is in your hand. So he literally placed his signature upon her. So, any luck, Rabbi Yosef?
1 second. Yeah, it isn't Perk Chelek. It's page Tzadichet Aleph.
Okay. Do you want me to share, or are you able to do it?
I'm getting there.
Okay, fine. Beautiful. I want to share this Gemara with you. I think you'll like it because it reminds me of the scene of Tamar. Thank you, Rabbi Yosef. We're very grateful to you.
It's amazing. It's that's one of my favorite stories, actually.
But it reminds us literally of Tamar. Literally, it's the same story.
And there's actually, by the way, there's a song called "The Leper Messiah." Unfortunately, it's not a Jewish song. It's a Christian song, but it is exactly that idea that.
Okay, so in the Shekoyach, there we go. Rabbi Yosef is sharing the story with us.
Oh, sorry, this is the wrong page, but so this is in Hebrew. But 1 second, I'll stop share. I'll share it in English. Yeah, 98A, paragraph 16. There.
Okay, here we go. We can read it. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said to Eliyahu Navi, Mashiach, when's the Mashiach going to come? He said, Zil Shailadi Day. He says, go ask him yourself. So he said to him, where is he sitting? Heicha Yosef. Where is he sitting? He said, Apisle de Rome. He's sitting at the entrance to Rome. Umay Simone. How am I going to recognize him? This is what Tamar also asked to Judah as well. She says, how am I going to recognize you? whoa, slow down, go up. You went down too quick. I didn't get there yet, Rabbi Yosef. So he says, Yosef ben Anaye Sovle Chalayim. He's sitting amongst the poor who are very sick. He's sitting with the sickest people of the world. V'kuan Sharoi Sirei Bechadzim. And all of them are sitting there and they're basically wrapped once. They unwrap themselves and wrap themselves once. Iu
Just,
Sharei Chad. What?
Rabbi, just one addition. They're just like the Jewish law, they're sitting outside of the walled city
Right.
because we believe that lepers are supposed to sit outside of the sorry.
So what the is a beautiful phrase, but what the other sick people do, the difference between them and the Mashiach is they unwrap themselves with all their bandages, they take all their bandages off, and they wrap them all at once. Whereas Iu Shari Echad v'Asir Echad, he unwraps one and then wraps the other one right away, meaning to say he does it very little at a time, because as the Gemara says, because Dilma mibaina because he's saying maybe the Mashiach is going to come right away, and I don't want to. Maybe it'll be my time to come, and I don't want to delay it. Anyway, that's just all I wanted to show you. Thank you so much, Rabbi Yosef, for sharing it. Basically, I just wanted to share that passage that says that the Mashiach is sitting at the entrance to Rome, and he looks like the forgotten people of the society, the people who we I'm not proud. I'm not saying this in a proud way, just the opposite. Who we don't look at, we walk past them, we don't see them. That's going to be the Mashiach, and that's what Tamar was sitting here. Tamar was this person who was the forgotten person of society. She was this person who was at the entrance, to the gates of society. She was a person who was dressed like a harlot, who the Mashiach is going to be somebody who's just like a harlot. That's what the Mashiach comes from, someone just like a harlot. And it should remind us before we ever cast judgment on anybody, ever, that to remember where the source of our redemption will come from, the source of our redemption. So that's such a powerful story that the Gemara in Sanhedrin shares with us. And so anyway, back at this point, it says, and so she gets up and she removes the veil, and she returns to her widowed clothing. I also think this here also reminds me of a big lesson for the Mashiach, big lesson for the redemption. The lesson is that when redemption comes, it's not going to be a straight path. She takes off her clothes, her widowed clothes, dresses like the harlot, but then she goes back into her widowed clothes. You know, there's starts and stops to the messianic redemption. It's not just straight. It's not all just in one moment, and then we never look back. And I believe that we are living now in the messianic era, that we're closer to the Mashiach than at any point in our existence. At no point in Jewish history have the Jewish people ever been as powerful, as strong as we are now. Certainly not since the destruction of the temple. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be a straight path till the final moment of the redemption. We have stops and starts, and we take a few steps backwards before going forward. But if we look at the big picture, the Jewish people are closer now than we've ever been. We're closer now than we've ever been. Vayishlach Yehuda al Gedi Izim, and Judah sent this goat biyad re'eu Uduami, in the hands of his friend the Aduamite, and he says, take this collateral miyad Aisha v'lo matzah. He couldn't find her. This also reminds us of the Mashiach, that we're looking for the Mashiach and we can't find him. The Rebbe Rabbunim of Peshischa says something about this. He says, this is only a Hasidic Rebbe could say this. You or I can't say this. Only a Rebbe can say this. And this is an ironic statement. This is the first time, like I said before, it's the first time the word friend appears in the Torah. So the Rebbe Rabunim says, what's he doing with his friend? He's sending his friend to pay off the harlot. He says, everybody needs a friend who he can reveal his soul to, its inner secrets, even all the sins that he has, like Judah before his friend Hira the Adulamite. This is the Musar movement, says we have to have a friend who we can bear our soul to, even our deepest sins, so that we all need a friend like that who can help us become better people. So even though his friend was helping him sin, it was a very important part of what he needed. Everybody needs a friend who knows us so well that we can't hide our true self from. See, this is such a tremendous insight from the Rebbe Rabunim. You need to be able to share our soul, our deepest sins, our deepest secrets with somebody, with a friend who could help us become better. There's so many people who are embarrassed to share things with, obviously, and we shouldn't. So many people.
Rabbi, can I add
Yes,
something?
yes.
People ask me why the Jewish people don't say God's name, and they're mostly Christian, but also from other religions. So I tell them, even if you grew up with King Charles III, who officially is the King of Canada, can you call him Chuck in public? You'll be beheaded, right? So it's the idea that even your best friend, there's one behavior that is in public, but there's another behavior that is in private, and none of us are at the level of somebody that grew up, I'll put that in quotation marks, with Hashem or with Moshe or whatever. It's just we can't be like that. It's not appropriate.
Beautiful. Thank you, Rabbi Yosef. Thank you so much. Thank you. We're getting a lot of value added today. Rabbi Yosef has joined us. A big shkoyach to Rabbi Yosef. Thank you. Thank you. So Vayishal, verse 21. Vayishal is on Shemekoma. And by the way, let me just give a plug for Rabbi Yosef's class. Every day he gives a class at 10 a.m., 15 minutes. It's a brilliant, brilliant class. I want to encourage people to join it. If you've joined it in the past, I know that you'll love it. Everybody who's on the class loves it. Yeah, I know. I see Jeff is here. Jeff joins it every day.
He's the only one that has a king. Thank you.
Yeah.
You don't have kings, so we need your presence.
Yeah, Baruch Hashem. Verse 21, Vayishalat Anshe Mekoma. And so Chira the Adulamite asked the people of the place, saying, Ayeh HaKadeshah. Where is this thing? Kadeshah means a harlot, but it's also related to the word kadosh, holy. So he says, Ayeh HaKadeshah. Rashi says, the reason why it's the same word for holy and harlot, is because Kadesha means mikudeshet, mizumenet uznus. She's set aside for something. The word kadosh, holy, means set aside. And so he's saying here, she was set aside for, where's this woman who was set aside for harlotry? But the words here also are, so you have to sometimes just pull out the words. He says, where is the Kadesha hi ba'inayim? Al Hadarach. Where is the Kadesha, this harlot that was in the crossroads on the path? But we could also read it like this. Where is Kadesha? Where is Kadosha? Where is the holiness? Ba'inayim. It's in the eyes. Meaning to say, where do you want to see? How do we protect ourselves with our holiness? ba'inayim al haderach, that we protect ourselves, we reach the path of holiness with what we look at. Now, on a simple level, this can mean that we don't look at inappropriate things, but really, it's even more than just simply looking at inappropriate things. Hold on 1 second. My wife was texting me. Okay. Highly unusual turn of events that my wife calls me because she's always so busy seeing the patients. So I had to tell her that we're almost done. Very unusual that I get a call from my wife during the day, but not because it's just because she's so busy. Anyway, so he says, "What is the Kadesha?" It's in the eyes that, but literally asks, "Where is this harlot on the crossroads?" And they said, "No, there was nobody here." Vayeishev al Yehuda, he returns to Judah. Vayomer, and he says, Lo mitzatia, I did not find her. And also, Anshe Makom Amru Lo Aita Bazeh Kadesha. They say there was nobody here like that. So this is a little bit redundant, meaning to say, we already know that she's not there. Why does it have to say both things? I didn't find her, and the people said he's not there. Why do we need both things? So here, we want to pull up a quote from the mayor of Parmesan. He says, this is similar to what I was saying before. He says, the birth of the what does it mean that the birth of the Messiah came through these births that were almost, so to speak, sinful? Lot and his daughters, Tamar and Judah, these are prohibited relationships. So he said you could explain it through a parable. That, let's say a person, says the mayor of Parmesan, let's say a person is like a smuggler, and you want to smuggle something into a country without paying the customs. What do? You take the diamonds, you wrap it in mud, or you put it in like you put it in something disgusting. And so it looks like, let's say you put it in a banana, I was reading this book that Sam Swirsky lent me about the Aleppo Codex. That way it was saved. They put it in a bag full of rotten fruit and they put it through the border. So you take it and you wrap it in something so you can't see it. But afterwards you clean it off and it comes back to its beauty. So this is what he's saying here. This is what the verse means. There was not here any, God forbid, anything disgusting. Meaning to say, if it hadn't been done like this, then it had to be snuck through. Otherwise, the evil forces would have stopped the mashiach from coming in. So sometimes, this is the Hasidic idea that sometimes even from the greatest sin, we could have rebirth. Because sometimes you have to sneak something in through the most sinful way. Meaning that, what this really goes to tell me, and I guess we'll stop here, is that the Hasidic thought, the reason why it was so attractive to so many people was its relentless optimism. The worst thing in the world is the source of optimism. The worst thing in the world is say, oh, now we have a turning point. This is how the bad snuck in. And even this scene of Tamar and Judah, it could be seen as the rock bottom of the world, but it's also going to be the source of optimism, the source of Mashiach. From the darkest moment will come redemption. Anyway, I'll stop here if anybody has any questions, and then I'll return my wife's call. Anybody have any questions?